I feel like we should open this up in a way that Liam will be proud of. So, welcome to Utter Punts. It's only the Brummies tonight. Right, okay. I'm figuring he'd be proud of that in some weird way. At least I remember to do an introduction. That's what I'm talking about, Liam. Yeah, today we're here to basically have a little look at what's been happening this season to date, where teams are, and we're going to do that through the lens of which teams should be selling at the trade deadline, because there are certain teams who probably now need to swallow a little bit of pride, understand where they're at from a franchise perspective. Can't help but look at you here, Jim, and possibly move in the direction of selling some of their expensive or older assets, which are going to be a little bit of a burden moving forward when you're going to be in a mini rebuild. So, without further ado, we're going to run through things from the perspective of the AFC first, have a look at each division, bottom team in each division, who's potentially there for them to trade away, if anybody, what they might be pursuing by trading that person away, and a likely destination for that particular player. And bottom of the AFC East at the moment, we've got the New England Patriots.
Being honest, they haven't got much to trade.
I was thinking the one I'm worried about is New England, because I don't know who I'd take from them.
They haven't, genuinely nothing really springs to mind. I think, regardless of how well Drake May has done in the last couple of games, he hasn't really got any receivers to throw to. The offensive line's is fairly suspect. Maybe Ramondre Stevenson, the running back, for a team that needs a running back. But bearing in mind where the Patriots are in their rebuild, then realistically, I think Ramondre Stevenson's only 25, so probably not an immediate thing for the trade block. Their defense is pretty horrible, to be honest. So there's not really a fat lot on the New England Patriots that I could see that would actually take the fancy of any of the other teams in the league, especially the contending ones. I.e., the purpose of a trade is to get better, and I'm not sure you can get better by trading for a New England player at the moment.
So they do have a cornerback who's a little bit interesting. Jonathan Jones, previously done quite well in terms of PFF grade, but you are quite right. It seems a little bit loose. There is a former Viking who might be available. KJ Osborne. I can't see any reason why he'd be staying around when he was brought in to be, like, when he signed for them. I thought he was probably going to be their number one or number two wide receiver. I don't think he's had many targets or much use at all this year. They're the only two that kind of don't really spring to mind. I did have to have a look at their squad and see if there was anyone there where I thought, right, I remember him. It's not a good look for the Patriots, is it?
Just a little side note on that. Did anyone see Bill Belichick talking about Gerard Mayo's comments about calling his own players soft, and Belichick going, well, last year we were the number one run defense in the league and it's the same guys, so I wouldn't call my team soft, particularly when it's always on the coaches at the end of the day. He said I'd always take the blame. I'm not sure he always did when he was a coach, but he's right about they were a good run defense last year, and now they're 26th or something in the league. So even that aspect of the game, I mean, you had Mac Jones, who I know you two don't dislike him as much as others, but their offense was running pretty poorly, but at least they had some aspects of a defense, and that seems to have gone as well now. So I think, like you said, probably Stevenson was the first one that came to mind for me, but he's really the only one I know other than him, KJ Osborne, Christian Gonzalez, and Drake May. And Gonzalez only got drafted last year and came off an injury. So if it is Stevenson, what team do we think need a running back that could use him?
I think there's plenty of teams out there that need a running back, to be honest. But like I say, I mean, what would you give up for him? Maybe a 6th round pick, maybe a 7th round pick, or a pick swap, 6th for Osborne and a 7th or something like that. It's not really worth the Patriots trading him. It's not really worth anyone trading for him. He's not really set the world on fire this year, and like I say, the return is going to be so minimal on what you'd get for him. I can't see there being any takers, to be honest. Going back to the Gerard Mayo thing, we had a quick chat about it privately amongst ourselves the other day, and we decided, we mentioned that Mayo's probably a little bit early for this head coaching job, and I think that's shining through. He's gone from the linebackers coach to the Patriots head coach in the space of a season, so it's interesting that Belichick called them soft, because I think they were soft last year. The only reason they really had the number one run defense was, sorry if you can hear that, that's my dog fighting in the background, which is obviously inevitable seeing as we're recording. So
Baxter, Luna. This seems like a perfect time to hear from our sponsors.
If you're anything like us at Utter Punts, we love the fantasy games surrounding the NFL, but sometimes they're a bit too focused on their American audiences. That's why we were blown away when the Fantasy Game Day app rolled into town, a weekly fantasy game with player values in pounds totally dedicated to the NFL's UK audience. There's insights and analysis and plenty of opportunity to compete with your friends, but the best bit, weekly cash prizes. Use code PUNTS when you sign up for a free entry after you play your first week.
That was a great sponsor break. Okay.
We really could do with getting Bonio or Pedigree Chum in as sponsors if we're going to have.
I didn't think the natural break would come 6 minutes in, but
well, there'll be more natural breaks. So Belichick didn't call them soft. Belichick said they weren't soft, Jim. Like, he basically contradicted what Jared Mayo had said. But Jared Mayo actually said they were playing soft, and the fact that last season they were so good in terms of run defense. Kind of does indicate that maybe Jared Mayo is aware of the fact there's not 100% effort being given, which is worrying at this point. But it's very hard for people, I think, to motivate themselves completely and 100% when they don't feel that there is hope. And right now they're bang bottom of that division. I think we probably spent too much time talking about the Patriots because
but the only
reason you're not interested,
the only reason they were the number one run defense last year was because everyone was 20 points up on them and ran the ball for the entire second half. So when you're running your third string running back at the guts of that defense every, for three times a series minimum, then yeah, you are going to be that, because when you're 20 points down by halftime, like they were in practically every game, and like they are in practically every game this season, then yeah, it is, it is going to fall off. So end of the day, yeah, maybe they're soft, maybe they're not soft. It doesn't really matter. They're just not very good.
To be fair, Bill Belichick has a tendency to insult his former teams, the Jets and the Patriots. He's been very complimentary of other teams. He may land a job at some point in the future. He hasn't written them off, but all his former employers have not had the good graces of Mr. Belichick on the Pat McAfee show usually. But sometimes,
you know what? The current Bill Belichick is outstanding. He's highly entertaining. I don't know if he's still with his latest wife, or girlfriend, but he's definitely a lot more relaxed than I ever saw him when he was actually the head coach of the Patriots, and he's quite a dry sense of humour. And he's also a genius when it comes to breaking down film. So
my favourite Belichick moment was when he pulls out the red flag, waits till the refs have all done the business and thought it was over, and then he just throws it like that right in front of the ref at his foot. It was so sassy.
My favourite was the draft when they went to the COVID draft, when they went to Belichick in his kitchen, and he'd obviously left the room and his dog was sat in the chair looking at the laptop. As you can see, my dog's backside as we are on the screen right now.
We're not that kind of channel.
This is going perfectly today.
Right, come on, let's move on from the Patriots. We think there's no one really worth them trading. Basically, there's not going to be any major trades anyway. They just don't have the talented player. We're sitting there waiting to be moved on. Maybe Josh Uche, the edge, might give someone some upside. Maybe he's been a bit limited due to the limitations of the Patriots' resources around him. I don't know, but we'll move on from them because they're not that interesting when it comes to trade material. The next team, though, AFC West's bottom team, the 2 and 5 Raiders. they have someone who I think pretty much half the league will be interested in getting right.
Antonio Pierce.
Oh, that guy. What a coach.
I thought it was Gardner Minshew, just based purely on the mullet and the mustache. To be honest with you,
I mean, that's one possibility, but let's be a little bit more serious. This is a guy who likes to spar MMA fighters for fun in his free time when he's not actually in the NFL. This is a guy who wants to win more than anything. That's right.
And mainly
Jacoby Myers. No,
his main accolade being the only other ginger Dave likes.
It's not true. George Kittle, kind of.
Max Crosby, obviously, is the one we're discussing. I mean, there's a number of potential suitors. I mean, anyone in the league would want him, but there's a number of contenders where the fit would make sense. I'd like to propose one that I wouldn't particularly like to happen, but does make sense. Detroit Lions. Obviously, Aiden Hutchinson getting injured, and they still performed against the Vikings in what was a really good back and forth match, but two main mistakes by us. They won, they capitalised, but they could still use that. It's a long old season, and they could still use that extra presence up front in the defence. He's elite in his position. The only thing is Hutchinson will be back next year, but imagine that as a duo. It would be scary, but that is a potential suitor. So from my end, I think Detroit might go in for him, but there's a number of different teams that could.
I think you're right. I think half the league, well, more than half, every team in the league would want a player of Max Crosby's quality and his personality. He's a leader. He plays when he's injured. He's a top 3 to 5 pass rusher in the NFL at any point in time. I agree with your assessment with the Lions, but what I would say is I think with Hutchinson going down, I actually think their likelihood of trading for Crosby is probably also gone down at the same time, because I think you'd probably want to pair him together. So in terms of an in-season trade, I think the Crosby piece might come off the table for the Lions. But I mean, like we said, you know, there's going to be plenty of interest, plenty of contenders in there. Washington are obviously a young and up and coming team. They shipped out all of their edge rushers at the last trade deadline and have managed to turn it around quite quickly. Chicago's another one. You know, got huge amounts invested on the offense, but not a lot invested on the defense. So I think there's plenty of potential options available there for Crosby, but I just think the cost might be too prohibitive, because I think it's going to be minimum 2, if not 3 first round picks for him.
Is he 27 now? How old is Crosby? Can you have a quick look up? Well, what I do recall with Crosby was he was actually our favourite edge rusher in his draft, and he didn't get picked until the 4th round, which we did not understand. 106th, I think, overall.
27, yeah.
It was a Mike Mayock special, wasn't it? Because Gruden picked the first 2 rounds.
Was it Clelin Ferrell?
Clelin Ferrell.
Clelin Ferrell, who's a very, very intelligent young man, but appeared to get picked as a new leader to a Raiders team. It was when Gruden thought it was a good idea to try and take inspirational leaders from college and put them in charge of men on the Raiders. And yet they got Max Crosby, 106th, and like the fact that there were 105 picks before him that draft, we didn't understand it. Didn't we have a first round grade on him?
Yeah, I think it was late first, early second. To be fair, so even
but with very high upside, and like, you know, the guy's different class. I think that there's a possibility if the Raiders weren't in the same division as the Chiefs should be really going for him, because that would be a move which would solidify their defense. But there's another AFC team, which I think if they got Crosby would pretty much be a lock for the Super Bowl, and that would be the Ravens.
Yeah, that's a really good shout. The Ravens, other than them being a bit penalty prone this season, I think their one weakness that they do have is in the trenches.
They've only really got Owa, haven't they, as a pass rusher, as a good pass rusher.
Yeah, but I mean, I think they've got 2 or 3, but the thing with the Ravens, they tend to do it by committee and have done for a long time now. They haven't really had a premier pass rusher for a while, to be honest, since probably Terrell Suggs. and when he was playing. So I think, yeah, I mean, look, the Ravens are a really good team. They're what are they 5-1, 6-1, something like that now.
They've lost twice, haven't they?
5-2.
Yeah.
5-2. So yeah, I mean, the Ravens are, with Henry and Lamar up front, on the offensive side. They've got a good secondary, good linebackers, fairly decent in the trenches, but Crosby would put them over the top, and yeah, would make them a pretty complete team, to be honest with you.
So, choice between the Detroit Lions and the Baltimore Ravens. If you were Crosby, which one would you want to go to? Bearing in mind he is from Michigan, I think that's possibly something to factor in.
I'd go into the Lions. And this just personally me. I don't get me wrong. I think the Ravens are a Super Bowl contender, but I also think the Lions are, and I think there's an easier path to the Super Bowl, if I'm being honest. If you're in the NFC, I think at the moment the contenders currently are Detroit, Minnesota in the NFC. Detroit, Minnesota, Washington maybe, but they've Green Bay. Some may put Chicago, but we haven't really seen them against real opponents yet. So no. So that's what I'm saying. Like, whereas in the AFC, it's Ravens, Chiefs, the Bengals are starting to get wins on their record. They're doing Bills. I'm not saying now, but the Chargers, they've got Harbaugh. They're not got the best record, but they're still 3-3. There's plenty of time to, you know what I mean? I feel like the path in the AFC is a bit tougher to the Super Bowl. Plus the Lions and Dan Campbell's and the defense is just brilliant. And by adding Crosby to that, and if he is from Michigan as well, I personally think that's the way he would go. But my real opinion is that I think he'll stay at the Raiders till the end of the season.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, I think it'd be better for him I think the Ravens are closer to being a complete team than the Lions are this season, but they've got a lot of players on 1-year contracts. So, and I think when you look at the way the Detroit team is built, from the whole 53-man squad, it's been a really good roster building exercise by their GM. They've got depth, they've got star players on both sides of the ball. They struck lucky with Jared Goff. So I think from a long-term perspective, I think Detroit would be the better option for him. But I think if he wanted to win a Super Bowl this year, then I'd probably go with the Ravens. But again, I'm with Ollie on this one and think he'll still be there after the trade deadline. Because I think after they've traded Devontae, if they traded Crosby as well, they could well be looking at half-empty stadiums for the rest of the season. And that's how your GM gets fired.
Hot take, I think the two teams we've just named have actually got the two best quarterbacks in the league at the moment, and I mean that in terms of the way they're playing. Like the way that Goff was able to stand in the pocket and dissect the blitz against a very confusing Vikings defense, although they did just seem to play dagger routes over and over again and take advantage of the fact that our nickel cornerback is a slight weakness. And
middle linebacker Blake Cashman was out, which was a really
but I mean that looks to be a route against us because they just spam that for a bit until we set things up to stop that in the second half, and then we lock them down again. But it's a fantastic effort from Goff. I never thought that he would have the guts, to be honest, to play the way that he does right now. But Dan Campbell, been a bit of a father figure there, hasn't he? He's turned a boy into a man. So, like,
but he doesn't take pressure either. He doesn't face much pressure in the pocket. Or when he does face pressure in the pocket, we saw what happened against the Vikings. He basically dropped the ball. So, I think
we're an inch away from getting one of a strip sack on him, but good grip there. Good grip.
It's
what
a
have you been holding
testament
on
to
to?
their offensive line. Their offensive line is good. They've got running backs. They've got wide receivers. They've got a tight end. That offense is pretty complete, to be honest with you. It doesn't have much, they could probably do with another number one wide receiver for Goff, but Goff makes the best of what he's got. to be fair to him. So, and yeah, I mean, at one point he was 17 of 19 against the Vikings. I think he ended up finishing about 20 of 24 or 20 of 25 or something like that, which was impressive, bearing in mind how good that Vikings defense has been this season. But at the same time, the Vikings didn't show him a lot of variation. They just blitzed and blitzed and blitzed and blitzed, and at no point did they drop their linebackers back into the passing lanes in the middle of the field. And that's where Goff's bread and butter was, and he dissected the Vikings defense, with precision, which was quite tough to watch, because when watching the Vikings be so good for the first 6 games of this season, to then watch Detroit score, was it 21 unanswered points at one point, was disappointing, and it showed a little bit of a lack of adjustments from the defensive coordinator. But it is what it is, right? You can't win them all, and it pales in comparison to the gutless play calling from your head coach on that last drive. So, and I'm going to hang my hat on that, because as a Browns fan, there's not many things you can hang your hat on for anything else. So, Villa won, and gutless play calling from the Vikings head coach.
Here's what I'll say. The reason I don't think it's like the 2022 Vikings, which were called frauds all year long, and in a sense they were, because it was all one-score games. I think 8, we won 11 one-score games, and we battled in the playoffs to New York. This team, at one point I saw it going where we could lose 45-10, genuinely, with the way the game was going. A proper hammering, a bit like the Cowboys got. And to be fair to the Vikings, they crawled back and they should have won. And I completely agree with your assessment on the choice by Kevin O'Connell on that last drive, where we just needed probably a first down, maybe 2 first downs, but at the very minimum to get into field goal range. And instead we ran it twice when the run game hadn't been that good all day. We got to 3rd and 4.
I'd argue different, to be honest. I've heard from both of you. What we really needed to do was run off the clock. The inexplicable thing for me was to actually throw it on 3rd and 4. Like that for me was the thing which I just thought, why have you done that?
But he loves doing that. Kevin loves doing that.
I get that. The other inexplicable thing was the fact that the Darnold missed a Jefferson, who by Jefferson standards was wide open. There was no need for that. So, like, I personally don't blame O'Connell. I can understand what he was trying to do, the way he was trying to hedge his bets. Aaron
Jones.
And I don't blame Darnold either. Darnold is what he is. And like, I hope he carries on being a good quarterback for us. But I can't wait until next year.
I blame everybody, and I hope the wheels have come off now. Darnold's, his wheels have come off. O'Connell lost his head. Defensive coordinator's gone down the toilet. You're going to lose out for the rest of the season.
I hope this podcast ages badly and I can give both of you. Why are we talking the Vikings anyway? Like, we're not meant to be. Like, I don't know why we're here.
We're talking about Detroit Vikings, but I'll say
that's what happened. Jim just didn't want to move on for the Browns, so he threw a little spanner in the works. Right, we're going to take a little break. We'll be back shortly.
Here at Utter Punts, we love watching the NFL with friends, and in our opinion, there's no better place to grab a bite to eat and watch the NFL than Beer Keller in Manchester. The burgers are massive, there's loads of HD screens, the wings are great, and there's a superb choice of drinks behind the bar too. Most importantly for us though, the people are brilliant. Like-minded NFL fans who want to enjoy the game and have a laugh. It's definitely one of the best venues to watch your favourite team in.
Okay, right, so we are moving on, because much as I enjoy talking about the Vikings, apparently people don't always enjoy hearing us talk about them. So instead, let's move on to a division where the team who are currently top are a bunch of cheating scumbags who I can't stand, and the team who are bottom are Jim's team, the Browns, and are there any talented players who might be available for trade from the Browns, who, I don't know, might only cost the team, say, $850,000 against the cap this year if they were to acquire them? James, anyone?
What could someone acquire Deshaun Watson and pay him $250 million?
No, there's only one sucker that would do that, mate. Well, actually, no, there were about 5 suckers that would have done that. I think if the Browns were going to... It's ironic, if you Browns could get rid of Watson now, it would cost us probably the same again to attach to Watson to trade him to another team. So it would be 3 first-round picks and Watson for a 7th rounder or in 2028 or something like that.
To be honest, if the Vikings didn't have Kirk, they probably would have been one of those teams. In fact, there were rumors about it. So
There were
it's
rumours,
only, yeah, there's only a joke. But in all honesty, the Browns do have some excellent players that can be used, as the Bills saw when they traded for Amari Cooper, who was the first to go, and there may be more.
No, you see, people are if the Browns fans are actually pretty okay with Amari Cooper being moved. He's out of contract at the end of the season. He didn't practice at all in the off season, and he'd been averaging 41 yards a game as the number one pass option. So, we got a 3rd-round pick for a team that wasn't let's be honest, the Browns weren't expecting to be where we are at the moment with the talent on the roster that is there. I mean, and with that, there's obviously Browns are probably the most talent heavy bottom feeders in the league at the moment in terms of what they've got and what could be available to other teams. We've got 3 top tier cornerbacks for a start that would, any one of those 3 would be prime trade bait for probably half the league. The Vikings would come to mind for Denzel
Newsome.
Ward or Greg Newsome in the slot. There's a couple of safeties. Thornhill potentially back to the Chiefs. Delpit signed a new contract at the end of last year. But look, I don't think the Browns are going to be in fire sale mode. To be honest, the defense isn't terrible. And I think they could probably stand at the most likely player to go from the defense is Greg Newsome, for which I think we'd probably be looking for a 3rd-round or a 4th-round pick for him, which would be a poor return, bearing in mind we drafted him in the 1st round, but he doesn't start on the outside, so it is what it is. I don't think anyone, the other one is the Darius Smith, who's obviously a sort of 2nd, 3rd-tier pass rusher, who Vikings fans know well as well. I think we'd probably be looking to get maybe a 5th or a 6th back for him. And that would just be a salary shedding thing to see what they can do about the Watson contract at the end of the season, because most people believe that Watson's played his last down for the Browns. I hope he has, because it's been a woeful 2.5 years to date. And like I said on a couple of podcasts ago, the only way the Browns can move on from Watson is if they're picking high in the draft and they select a quarterback because he's cheap. And that looks like a distinct possibility now. So eating 78 million or whatever it is next year in dead cap seems to be a high likelihood. But yeah, there's quite a few. There's a few players on the Browns. Only one of the starting corners, Zadarius Smith. Myles Garrett, if you want to mortgage your entire future there.
What would it cost? I'm sure he's the player that most people are interested in, Jim. Like in terms of the Lions, we've already discussed the fact that they should be interested in Crosby, and then you've got Myles Garrett sitting there with a cap hit that this year will be minuscule for whoever picked him up, 800k. Next year I think it goes up to 26 million, but I mean that's not a lot for a player of his ability. And in terms of like his age, his injury, I mean, don't get me wrong, he plays through injuries. I know both his feet are currently injured. Last year he had his arm taped back on and he played through that as well. But in terms of his injury history, is there any thought on the Browns cashing out on Myles Garrett, or is this a little bit more of a Joe Thomas thing where Garrett is the Browns, he's not going anywhere?
I don't think anyone's off limits, to be honest. But in order to get Myles Garrett, you'd be paying a Deshaun Watson size trade price for him. So you're talking 3 first-rounders at plus, I think, in that situation. Whether it's a young player or whether it's maybe a 2nd, a 3rd, or a 3rd and a 4th. But the only way that the Browns fans would accept Myles Garrett being traded is if you get 3 first-rounders for him. Which I think is probably too rich for most people. He's still got 2 years left on a very affordable contract on 25 million a season to be, reigning defensive player of the year. So it's one of those. Again, every team in the league would want him, but is there is he going to push that team over the top in a lot of respects? I don't think so. Especially not with 2 bad feet. He hasn't been as effective this year as we saw last year. But that's the story for the Browns across the board, to be honest with you. And how our offensive line coach has
all right,
still
Jim,
got a
you've
job.
done a fantastic job of building a case for teams leaving him alone. I can sense that that's what you want. Ollie, what would you pay for him, mate?
Well, this is interesting. I don't think this trade will happen by any mile, right? But let's say, in a fantasy world, if the Vikings offered Jordan Addison and a first-round pick, would that be of the value for Garrett? Like a couple lesser picks.
Jordan Addison, mate. So why would we do that? Like, you might as well just trade your offensive line coach because.
Yeah, but let's be honest, Jim. The Browns haven't done many logical things in the last few years, so let's follow.
But not when Jimmy Haslam gets involved.
Reigning coach of the year and won 13 games last year. Okay.
Once. One good season is what 30.
I'm
I'm just saying from a potential thing. I don't think it's going to happen because I don't think the Vikings go after an edge rusher anyway. I'm not sure that's the position.
I think you're chatting breeze, mate, to be honest with you. So, like, you can take your Jordan Addison and your first round pick and stick it. So, yeah, there we go. End of conversation.
This couldn't have gone any better as far as I'm concerned.
There is another name we have to mention. Obviously, let's leave Garrett alone because Jim's upset at Garrett. I mean, he's just come off an injury, but some teams will probably look for Nick Chubb.
Oh, Nick Chubb. Didn't even think of him. I mean, yeah. We'll give you a 2025 4th rounder for Nick Chubb now, today. Vikings.
Let's leave the Vikings. What teams?
I wouldn't say, look, I think if you made it a 3rd round pick, I don't think it would be against the realms of possibility.
2026 3rd rounder.
He's out of contract at the end of the season. And yeah, to be honest, I could see that he didn't. I think he averaged 1.8 yards a carry in his comeback. But again, that speaks to okay. Offensive line's terrible, so it's not his fault.
Okay, we can't speak just the Vikings and Browns, so let's stay on the Browns with Chubb. But in terms of potential suitors, on a serious basis, let's say he's open for trade. Could the Chiefs be one? Because Pacheco's got the injury. I don't know how long that's for, but obviously they're looking.
Hunt's having a career renaissance at the Chiefs, though.
Yeah.
In fairness, he's my starting running back in fantasy and won me my 2nd game in a row this week. So I've got a soft spot for Kareem Hunt.
I'm just looking at potential suitors that are missing running backs that are contenders. Could the 49ers?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Let's be honest, McCaffrey's also on my team. No one told me he only had one leg before I drafted him, so thanks for that. But ultimately, again, there's plenty of teams out there. The Lions, again, would be in there. I think the Commanders could probably be in there. There's plenty of teams. If Chubb rediscovers his form over the next couple of weeks, then I think the Browns would be somewhat open to moving him if they got a 2nd or a 3rd rounder in exchange for him. The guy's 28, 29, coming off his 2nd serious knee injury. There's no guarantees. Plus, I don't think we'll probably re-sign him at the end of the season unless it's on a very, very reduced contract. He's been paid $15 million a year for the last 2 years and this year as well. His new contract's probably looking somewhere in the region of 7. So I think someone else, I think there's plenty of teams that could do with him if it's a fully fit Nick Chubb. Let's be honest, he opens up the offense for anyone. But yeah, I think the Browns would be open to moving him if they got an offer that matched their value.
Okay.
That's a great shout. Joel Bitonio as well. I mean, I don't know how fit he's been, but he's another Browns player I've got a lot of appreciation for his skills.
Yeah, Wyatt Teller as well. They're both Pro Bowl guards, and the concern is, like, you've got 2 Pro Bowl guards, you've got a Pro Bowl center, you've got a Pro Bowl right tackle, and you're still giving up 7 sacks a game. So something's not quite right, and it's not all on the left tackle. So I think, to be honest, I don't think there's many players on the Browns that are untouchables. I think Garrett probably is the only one, but even then, I'm not sure he's completely untouchable if someone offered a ridiculous amount for him. But yeah, I think there's some players to be had there, and I think the Browns, with the season's over, unless Jameis Winston does a Joe Flacco and pulls us back. So we'll see.
If I like, not to get political or anything, but I don't care who wins, whatever. But if I was the White House or any cable news channel, I'd trade for Jameis Winston just for his pure speeches.
Eat the W's, man. Hard Knock reference there, which I don't know if people will get it, but I do recall.
He's great at speaking.
What, I don't know why my mind's going to blank on him. What was the name of that quarterback who was at Tampa Bay with him at the time? Who, wherever he went, someone would get injured and he'd become the starter. He now does the NFL commentary. Great beard.
Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Fitzmagic. Yeah, I remember him after Winston gave that speech, just walking up to him in the dressing room and going, that was an interesting speech you gave. Oh, did you like it? Well, so okay, let's leave the Browns alone. Much as I enjoyed that, and I hope everyone else enjoyed it as well. Just watching Jim's face and Anyway, let's move on to the final division in the AFC South, and bottom of the league. Pat will be delighted with this. We're not talking Jaguars because they're not bottom of that particular division. It's the Tennessee Titans, which is a shame because I did kind of want to touch on Tavon Walker basically having had 11 sacks in 11 games, which is kind of indicative of him starting to come good at this stage in his career, I'd argue, on a pretty bad team. So maybe I should be taking back my thoughts that the Jags have made a complete mistake not taking Aiden Hutchinson. At least right now, it's paying off for him, isn't it?
Right. So
did take Hutch getting hurt for that to happen. So yeah, Titans. Who have they got? Who would you want? Is there anybody? Let's go, boys.
Jeffrey Simmons. I mean, we know this week that it was only yesterday, was it? DeAndre Hopkins gone to the Chiefs. Now he's a bit old, but you know they tend to make a in-season trade for a wide receiver every year. It was McCole Hardman last year and someone else the year before. But yeah, Jeffrey Simmons. I mean, I know we've harped on about Vikings and Browns because obviously we're Vikings and Browns fans, but the Vikings and Jeffrey Simmons would make sense. It just depends on the capital we'd have to give up for him. But he is 27, so I think he's a bit older than some of the other ones that people have discussed. I know Dexter Lawrence, but I think he's too good. And like Jim said for Garrett, it would cost mortgaging your future probably to get him. So Simmons might make more sense. I can't think of many. I think they have a few good defensive players, to be fair, the Titans. Maybe a few cornerbacks or something. But you probably know more on me on that.
Snead? Did they get Snead in the
Jerry
offseason?
Snead, yeah. But they just got him, didn't they? Like this.
Yeah, but I don't think they were expecting to not challenge at all. I mean, it would be a quick out, but it would be the best time to get him out because you'd get potentially the best return on him from a trade perspective.
Yeah, the Titans are one of the worst 5 teams in the league. I think it's fairly safe to say. Jeffrey Simmons is their high point on defense. Offense, they got rid of Henry in the offseason. They've got rid of Hopkins, this week via trade. So, and that just weakens Will Levis even further. I think the Titans have pretty much signaled their intention to tank. I think for Simmons, to be honest, I think the closer we get to the trade deadline, the more his price will come down from a trade perspective. I think they're probably looking for a first for him at the moment, whereas I think they could potentially take a second and maybe a fourth as we get closer to the trade deadline. I'm not sure Kwesi at the Vikings will pay that for an interior defensive lineman because that's not typically a position that analytics values too highly. But I agree he'd be a good fit for you guys, but obviously you don't have any picks to actually trade for him. So that's a slight problem, of course. They are going to be on the lookout for a wide receiver. So maybe what about Addison for Simmons straight up would be a question that I'd ask to you guys. And because they're gonna need that and to flip the script back to you after the laughable offer that you put forward for Myles Garrett.
I'd take it in a heartbeat, mate. But that's only because I think Addison is a really good footballer. I think any team that wanted to trade for him would be doing a good thing. But in terms of what the Vikings have at our disposal, in terms of the strength of the next draft class coming through, and with lots of later round wide receivers that I quite like the look of, that it would make sense to me. to jettison Addison and make do with Naylor, who, when he has played instead of Addison, has done a fairly good job. Having said that, I do like Jordan Addison. The only reason I'm saying this will be a good idea is because I think interior pressure, being able to actually bring some pressure when we're only rushing 3, would significantly open up the playbook for Flores. And I would rather unlock that side than stick with the current positives that Addison is bringing, particularly when we've got TJ Hawkinson on his way back now as well. So for me, I mean, if it was just a Simmons for Addison, oh my, I'd do it in a heartbeat. And that's with liking Addison. I think it would be a trade which would benefit both teams. I think it would give us a window now. It would also give us a problem would be solved before next off season, so we could basically just pick and choose where we're going to spend our resources. We have an excellent wide receiver coaching in Keenan McCardle, who I think his value to us is significantly underrated. I'm confident that whoever he wanted to draft would be someone that he could turn into an effective weapon for us. And I'm much more confident of us being able to funnel through more and more wide receiver production, because that's something the Vikings have been good at, than I am to get a good player in a defensive tackle who's got a record of being able to stop the run and apply interior pressure. So for me, it'd be a no-brainer. I'll probably be offering Addison plus a 2026 second in order to get it over the line. If that's what it took, it just wouldn't bother me. I think we'd be significantly strengthening the defensive side of the ball for a more minuscule and temporary cost to our offense. Plus, Addison keeps doing stupid things in the off-season.
That wasn't the response Jim wanted, so I'll do it for you, Jim, because I wound you up earlier. That's a ridiculous trade. Why would you even suggest that? How dare you? Addison's our number 2. He's the best wide receiver duo in the league. That's crazy. Blah, blah, blah. There you go.
You genuinely wouldn't do it, though, would you? You wouldn't include Addison. I think there's a lot of Vikings fans who'd feel that way. I just don't.
No, I don't think it's outrageous, because we've not been good at many things in our history, the Vikings, but one thing we're elite at is picking wide receivers, so I wouldn't mind it, but I don't think that's on the cards. I don't think, if we did end up going for Simmons, I don't think Addison would be given up. But in terms of other potential suitors, if Simmons is the one, who else could we look at? Potentially other teams? Any thoughts?
Ravens, Lions, Steelers, and it's possibly the Seahawks. There's again, if a player that good comes on the market and is available at a reasonable price, the Chiefs again, the Bills, anyone that's looking, even if you've got a player in that position already, Simmons is probably going to be an upgrade over probably 95% of the players at that position. So I think you could pretty much say most teams in the league again would be interested in him. But in terms of the contenders, the Chiefs, the Ravens, and the Bills really stick out for me as the 3 that would be aggressively pursuing him. I'd like to think, apart from Ollie's flippant response to my response to the Myles Garrett trade, which I didn't really appreciate. I think there's plenty of options out there, and I think he'd make the Vikings defense better. I completely agree with what they have said around opening up that playbook and the interior pressure. But that argument is correct for every team that would potentially be looking at him.
Yeah, but it'd be better with us.
If you had to if you had to gamble on it, first team that comes to mind, which one would you think is the most likely for him to end up to if he does get traded? Just Ravens. What about you, Dave? The most likely.
If I wouldn't trade him in conference, I don't think, if I could help it. I think it would probably be it would be one of the NFC North teams. It'd be us, the Packers, or the Lions, because you'd be wanting to go for a team that is contending. I think the clearest team to a path to paying him of those is us, the Minnesota Fighting Vikings. So yeah, it's obviously the Vikings. Sorry, Jim. Apologies, mate. No bias from me whatsoever. Right, let's move on. Yeah, saw the Ravens getting stronger. I already gave them Crosby as an idea earlier, and I don't want any more of it because, well, they're a despicable team. Right, we'll take a quick little break, and then we're going to fly into the NFC, where there's probably fewer candidates for trade, I think. Okay, lads, let's get into the NFC. So, the National Football Conference, we do have, I think, only a couple of teams that I would argue are completely ready to trade, because I feel that we're not going to do the Rams, and we're not going to do the Rams today purely for one reason, and that is there's every chance they beat the Vikings tonight, go 3-4, which is
No. There is one.
Which is level for second place, mate. No, there's no point. There's no point. They could well be back in their division by the time this evening is over.
I get that, but there's one player who, not Stafford, one player who I think could be leaving anyway, regardless of whether they win, and would be Cooper Kupp. And I was saying this to you earlier, Cooper Kupp to the Buccaneers would make sense. With Godwin,
Mark Evans has gone down for 3 weeks,
and
Godwin's
as
out
well.
for the season. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Evans could be back in time for the playoffs if they make it, but they need a wide receiver one right now. I don't know about the cap, how much draft capital they have or whatever, but I don't think it's going to be too expensive because of his age.
They're saying he's going to take they want a second round pick for him at 31.
I don't think he's got much guaranteed money left over the next couple of years.
No,
but he's 31 years old, massively injury prone. It would take a team that has no wide receivers but should be challenging to want to go for it. I see the Bucks all day being an option from that perspective, but I also think that they're going to face stiff competition from other teams as well if he is available. But if I'm a Rams, I'm taking the worst team that offers me their second round pick. So Bucks all day probably, and I suppose the same argument then goes for Simmons as well. In terms of the 3 NFC North teams that I said were likely candidates for him, you do have that potential that the Vikings have got by far the weakest QB in this year, so we're more likely to crash and burn later in the season. So another reason why that makes it more likely. But I would say, if they win tonight and they go 3-4 and Cooper Kupp plays outstandingly well, do they cash in or do they think that they can still contend? And the reason why I think they can still contend is simply the fact that at the moment in their division, you have a situation where the Seahawks are 4-3 and the other two teams ahead of them are both 3-4. There's still a lot of inner division games to be played. So I think you're raising a great shout, and if they do kick off, basically get rid of Cooper Kupp, I can see him going that way. But I don't think we can say the Rams are 100% sellers just yet.
No, I agree. It's just because that's been one of the main ones talked about, but I haven't really seen him connected to the Bucks, and I thought that makes the most sense right now, given their situation.
Think that's a hell of a shout, mate. Yeah. 100%.
But I think that from what I was reading, the Steelers are the favourites to land in, which doesn't make much sense to me, to be honest. I think they've got Pickens that's underutilised, I think, to say the least. But I mean, again, I don't think they'll get a second rounder for a 31-year-old wide receiver. They might do. Apparently, the Rams are quite happy to pay a large portion of his salary for this year as well in order to secure that second round pick. It is what it is.
Yeah,
Bucks, but again, I think Bucks were not wide receiver players up until Sunday, and then at the end of Sunday's game, they all of a sudden went straight to the top of the list in that respect.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's what I thought. Just situationally, it makes sense. They wouldn't have gone for it before with Evans and Godwin. You wouldn't have any need to. But if you still think, because Baker's, he's made some mistakes, but he's a solid quarterback. They have a winning record. There's a chance to make the playoffs, but you do need a wide receiver one for that. And Evans will be back week 12, I think it is. So, if they're trying to contend and they think so, it could make sense. But someone like the Titans will probably just overpay for Kupp and he'll end up sad and with more money.
But they're not going to buy at this point. But
no, I know. I'm just saying that feels like something they do.
Yeah, well, maybe. But who knows? I doubt it. So NFC North, there's not any team who are going to be selling at this point. In fact, I think all 4 teams, including the Bears, are probably thinking that they're great at the moment. Can't wait till you play a good defense, lads. And then you've got
wide receiver that they got from the Panthers last year.
What more? DJ Moore.
Yeah, it does. I haven't heard much about him, and he was expected to be really good, and I don't think he has been.
He's a really good player, but he's not doing many of the crossing routes over the middle, which is where Caleb is primarily targeting at the moment.
They've got Keenan Allen and Roma Dunze as well, though, don't they?
Yes,
So maybe they've got an abundance.
Keenan Allen hasn't really played that much until the last couple of games. It's an interesting setup with the Bears, but they're 4-2, so we can't. And they're definitely not selling. No chance. So I think,
No.
and I have seen them sort of apparently trying to squeeze some value out of one of their backup running backs, but bearing in mind their own run game is exactly all that. I'm surprised they think they can squeeze that much out of their running backs. So we'll ignore the Bears. We're going to do the Panthers first because I feel that there's a little bit more material to talk about with the last team that we'll cover off. So we'll do the Panthers, who are bottom in the NFC South. They're currently 1-6. They have Bryce Young, who's a former number 1 overall pick, currently not being played. They have the Red Rifle.
He's back. Bryce Young's back this week because Andy Dalton's injured.
I thought that might be happening. That's what I was building up to. He was in a car crash with his family, and also in the last game recorded, I think it was a 3.1 QBR, which is the worst that's been recorded anywhere this season. So Bryce Young being back in, happy days. I'm hoping Bryce comes in with Bryce comes back better, let's put it like that. But is there anyone on the Panthers who you think might be an option for any of the teams who are challenging up the top?
As talent deficient as the Titans and the Patriots, I'd argue, to be honest. Nothing really springs to mind. Maybe one of their running backs, Chubba Hubbard or something like that.
Hubbard's a good player.
JC Horn.
Yeah.
JC Horn, cornerback. They've also got the former Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver Deontay Johnson. Am I saying his name correctly? The little speedster on the outside. He's potentially not going to be contending there, is he? They also took a wide receiver that I liked in the draft, Xavier Leggett, who I just think isn't being used the way I anticipated him being used. He's more of a
He's got a couple touchdowns, I've seen. He
has, but he's an absolute athlete. I was expecting to see him used like Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel. Maybe that's a potential option for the 49ers. But they'd probably have to pay something for him.
I can't see him trading Leggett, but I think any one of the other 3 players that you mentioned, you might get a 6th rounder for Deontay Johnson, maybe a 6th rounder for Chubba Hubbard, and maybe a 4th rounder for JC Horn.
Does Baxter disagree?
Was that Baxter or Luna who thought that?
With that big Panthers fan, Luna. That's why she's not. Yeah,
I think any Panthers fans listening will think they can get more for JC Horn than a 4th round pick. But they have to be realistic, don't they? If you're a selling team, you're going to struggle to keep those players
their
anyway.
top trade option, then the Vikings should. We've spoke about them with linked with every player so far, and it's not. They've got a very talented roster, but cornerback that would work for them. If you could get him for a 3rd or a 4th, or the equivalent of that would be a great move. But Horn to the Saints. Horn, any team again would look to get someone like Horn. 1st rounder, not really lived up to expectations. I think it's fair to say, had his injury troubles, but there's still a player in there. When he does play well, he plays really well. So I think Horn's probably their top tradable player outside of Leggett, who they selected in the first this year that's not available. Deontay Johnson's another one. Always flattered to deceive for me, ex-Steelers, so not a big fan personally. Just overall talent deficient team, and that's why they're going to be picking in the top 3 again this year, like they did last year, like they did the year before that. They haven't built a team. They traded away their future for Bryce Young, and Bryce Young, in my opinion, will probably end up being traded for something like a 6th round pick at the end of the season, or cut, to be honest with you. Which is a shame, and I think he'll probably go on to do something decent at another team with a more competent leadership structure than the Panthers.
Entirely feasible. But we've said it before, the most important thing when you're drafting a quarterback is to make sure that your head coach can coach up a quarterback, and secondly that they want that quarterback.
And you can block, for him, and he's got people to throw to. Just
all
simple
things that would be nice.
Yeah. You just. But instead of having someone to throw to, you trade away your top wide receiver to get him, which in retrospect doesn't seem like a great decision, does it?
I know.
And of course, you've spent first rounders on offensive linemen that don't fancy blocking, so it's always difficult when you're under siege.
I know we're talking about trades. Just a very quick question to you both, just because I'm curious. If they had just picked Stroud, do you think he'd be as successful as he is? Or no? Do you reckon he'd be a bust?
I think he'd be a quarterback showing flashes of absolute class who's getting beaten up a lot.
Okay. Just curious. Just wanted to see.
I think he'd have shown a lot more. He wouldn't have been dropped.
No. Okay.
He hasn't got, he still wouldn't have any receivers to throw to, and you look at the Houston receivers that they've got. But
he turned Nico Collins. He turned Nico Collins from someone that no one cared about for being a true ex-wide receiver in the league, right? So like he definitely is the kind of QB, in my opinion, who it's the truck trailer thing, isn't it? You want your quarterback to be a truck, someone who can pull the rest of the team along with him, rather than someone who needs to be carried by the team. I think you can have success within different elements of that, and it depends on how your team is built. But CJ Stroud, for me, is the kind of QB who elevates whatever team he's in. It's just dependent on how much talent is around him would limit how much he'd elevate. Well, I feel like Bryce Young really needed an incredibly smart centre to do all of his adjustments for him. It really needed everything to be perfect.
Big part of it's coaching as well, right? And, the Houston Texans have got DeMeco Ryans, who's a very good head coach. Their offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator are strong, whereas the Panthers are turning over their entire coaching staff, twice in the 2 years that Bryce Young has been there. So ultimately, it's difficult learning new offenses, learning everything, learning your protections and all that stuff. But ultimately, like we said, Panthers are talent deficient. They haven't got anyone on the offensive line. They've got three third wide receivers at best at the moment. They've got a couple of running backs, but they can't run the ball because they're losing every game by 15, 20 points by half time. So they have to abandon the run. Whatever quarterback's in there at the moment is not set up to succeed. They spent an absolute fortune on interior offensive line in the offseason. They paid a guard $100 million to sign for them. I can't remember what his name is, but that's not stemmed the flow. And ultimately, they're just, like I said, they're a poorly constructive squad. And they are 2, 3, 4 years away, or a significant trade away of stocking some picks, of actually having the right amount of talent where they can support that level of a rookie quarterback.
Okay. I feel bad for the Panthers. Best bet now is to jettison things and try and rebuild at some point in the future, but with a coaching staff that you want, with a competent coaching staff that can build that team, which will help you. Honestly, I'd be on the if I was them, I'd be on the phone to Belichick, telling him come in and you can run things. But
see, I'd be trying to take Brian Flores from the Vikings for my next head coach, personally.
Well, of course you would, because you think it would upset me. We're moving on now. We're gonna move on to the very last team we're gonna discuss today, folks. One more selling team in the NFC. If you are listening, my friend Liam, you can put up with this pain, or you can just stop where you are. Cool. Right, okay. Let's discuss the New York Giants, who are currently 2-5. They haven't actually been particularly battered by anybody apart from the Minnesota Vikings on the opening day, really. They've got a point differential where they've only scored 99 points this year. The most astounding stat that I've heard, which probably means that he's not really a trade candidate for any other team in the entire league, is Daniel Jones hasn't thrown a touchdown at home for over a year.
So I think it's 2 years in December.
Happy anniversary to him, if it happens.
Let's pay that boy $40 million a year. It's going to work out.
Quarterback in that is, mate.
Look at you jumping in straight away to try to give someone else with Deshaun Watson kicking.
I'd trade Deshaun Watson for Daniel Jones tomorrow, just for the record.
I bet you would now. His foot's falling off as well. Anyway, poor Deshaun Watson. No idea what he might have done him previously to deserve such karma.
No idea.
Getting
No.
booed as you're getting carried off the
Apparently,
field. Must have
according
been a lonely place.
According to Miles Garrett, he's been an outstanding citizen throughout his college and professional career in the NFL. I'm not. Did you forget about those 27 lawsuits that he's got? Do you know what I saw the other day? He's got more lawsuits than he's thrown touchdown passes as a Browns quarterback. So there we go. As a magical stat for you.
Deshaun, come on, sort your life out. Take this moment for
Give it up,
reset.
kid. Just give it up.
Come back, be the best QB in the XFL. Anyway, the
Jets will end up with him. The Jets will end up with him.
Right, stop. We're putting the booting on someone when they're very much down, but I prefer to do it when he was on. Oh, hold on a minute. You guaranteed 230 million. Come what, mate? You'll be all right, mate. Chin up, lad. Those boos should be like I don't know.
Maybe you'll be a better quarterback.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Anyway,
the Giants. Let's talk about the Giants.
Giants. So I'll give you a little list of players which have appeared on the USA Wire as potential trade players for the New York are trying to get rid of. Then tell me if that's correct, or tell me if there's anyone else that they should really be getting challenged for, shall we say. So we've got wide receiver Darius Slayton, decent player. Linebacker Aziz Ajulari, who's also a decent player. We've got O-line Evan Neal. Worst top 5 pick. Didn't even know why he was up there. Hadn't shown that much at college, but he tested magnificently at the combine. That's the kind of stuff that should get you fired. Running back Devin Singletary. I keep forgetting how effective their running game's been this season. And then, of course, you might want to trade for the backup to Daniel Jones, Drew Lock. Is there anyone else on the New York Giants who you might think teams might want to trade for?
I was just going to say, I think the Giants could really use someone like Saquon Barkley to help their running game.
Yeah, I think that'd be a really good signing for them. You know,
maybe they could trade. Maybe they could trade Singletary for him. I don't know. Is that?
I'll tell you what.
187 yards on 16 carries or whatever it was.
Get this though, he literally turned down the opportunity to go for 13 more yards, which would have meant that his most successful yardage running game ever was against New York in the very first game he'd play for him. I would say this: he's a scholar and a gent, Saquon, because he said, "No, let the young boys eat," but in reality, he knew how much that would hurt the people of New York. So if anyone in New York hates him for having left, look at what he did for you there, because he could have rubbed it in. He chose not to. He should still be one of your legends.
But he was mic'd up, and it has been all over every meme and social media going that he turned down that opportunity. So yeah, he did you a solid, but he made sure to rub it in other ways. So Saquon Barkley, I salute you, sir. And let the rookies eat on that Giants defense that again dominated Deshaun Watson. But that's another story.
He was
But yeah, when we talk about the Giants though and people to trade, I think that Ajari is probably about the only one that would garner any significant interest. I think Slayton's probably
one guy, a big
Malik
guy.
Neighbors.
Nah, a big guy right in the middle of their day line.
Dexter Lawrence.
Brian Daboll. He's not big anymore, to be fair to him. But
Dexter Lawrence, possibly the best three technique in the league.
Interesting tidbit on Dexter Lawrence. They selected him with the pick that the Browns traded for Odell Beckham Jr.
Really?
Yeah.
How old is Dexter Lawrence?
They won that trade. 25, 26. He's not.
I think he's older than that now. I want to say he's 28.
He's 26. 26.
Is he really?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
So
he's younger than Simmons by a year.
Yeah.
Jeffrey
And
Simmons.
he is an absolute beast. He's 193 centimeters tall, 155 kilograms.
Yep.
Just for context, was it 110 kilos? He's 15 stone, I think. So he's a big guy, and he's an amazing athlete. Now, for me, if I'm them, he is my most tradable asset. They are not in a window to win a Super Bowl for at least the next 3 years, right? I think at 26 years old, you could get 3 first-round picks minimum for him.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think you'd be talking maybe 2 first rounders and maybe a second or something like that, but 3 first rounders wouldn't be out of the question. I don't think the Giants will trade him, to be honest with you. I think their general manager's getting fired at the end of the season because of how they treated Saquon Barkley and then what he's done to them now he's come back. And that was very well publicised on Hard Knocks, and it makes him look very, very stupid. And I don't think the Giants ownership are going to take kindly to that after what's just happened. It'd be interesting to see if Daboll survives, to be honest with you. I think he probably deserves to survive because he's been made to play with Daniel Jones as his quarterback when they could have selected one in the draft this year and possibly turned it around. But they got Malik Neighbors, so they've got a foundational piece on the outside for a receiver. They've got their defense isn't terrible. They've got a couple of offensive linemen that they've drafted, Andrew Thomas and things like that. But Evan Neal's a bust, that we said, which is a popular theme amongst Alabama offensive tackles, it must be said. So if there is an Alabama offensive tackle in the draft this year, buyers beware would be my advice. It hasn't gone too well. There's one selected this year as well, and I don't think is he? I think maybe by the Jets. I'm not sure that's gone too well either. So yeah, look, I think their best trade piece is Lawrence. Their most realistic trade piece is probably Ojari, the linebacker, which I think cost wise maybe a 3rd or a 4th rounder would probably be fair for him. In terms of teams interested, you can look in their own division. The Dolphins would be one. The Commanders would probably be another one. I think quite a few teams. I think the Ravens again would be interested. The Lions, but we're talking about all the contending teams. I think the Buccaneers could potentially be interested in him as well. Seahawks. There's plenty of options out there. Good player. Watched him play. Turns the corner well. Can play the pass. Can rush the passer. So all in all, yeah, I think he's a good player.
Cool. Ollie, any final thoughts on options for the New York Giants? Liam's second team, his first team, the Bears, doing quite well at the moment.
And I'm happy for him. All I'll say is, I agree with Jim's assessment that it's simply going to be too much I think for any team to get Dexter Lawrence, which is why I said earlier that I think Simmons would be a more likely destination for our team, Dave, just because I think it would cost less. And it still fills that gap that's needed. And in terms of from our perspective, I don't think the Vikings are ready to mortgage the future in a season with Sam Darnold. But yeah, Dexter Lawrence is brilliant, and the Giants do have some weapons. They're not as far away as like the Panthers and the Titans, they are still quite a few pieces short. Don't get me wrong, but
they need to fire their GM.
Yeah, but they're not.
They need to invest the pieces that they have in the rebuild to actually be able to rebuild. But you're right, they're not as far behind as the others because the others don't really have any assets that are worth investing in other than the aforementioned Jeffrey Simmons. There is no one that the Panthers can give up who can potentially kickstart a rebuild for them. They basically wasted a load of resource on Bryce Young unless he comes back and comes in as a big challenge now.
I agree. Brian Burns, Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, there are makings of them, but at least they can, like you say, they can get draft picks for them and whichever way they go. But I think right now, mid-season, 3 first rounds or even 2 firsts in the second might be a bit much for a team to risk on. Not risk, he's a great player, but
it's not a premium. It's just not a premium position, Rod. It's difficult to justify that when teams are you guys have got an undrafted free agent man in your interior defensive line at points. So, and I think that's the story across the league. 3rd and 4th rounders, in that position, and teams that are analytics heavy, especially, just don't invest on linebackers and interior D line. So that massively narrows the market. And then, it's the same as a running back, devalued. Defensive tackles are arguably devalued as well. So I just while they might be worth it, are you going to get it? That's the big question.
No, which is why I think Simmons is. If a trade's going to happen for the Vikings, I think that's the most likely. But I'm not even sure of that. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I think the most likely trade for the Vikings would be Greg Newsome from the Browns.
From you guys, what, for 2026 second?
Would that be good for us?
No,
Do you reckon?
I think there'd be a third, maybe a pick swap or something. With
It's
Newsome.
good. Greg Newsom's good. He can play outside, inside. I think he can play nickel, right? If you wanted him to. Yeah. But let's stop focusing this on the Vikings, and let's finish off with just a quick sort of one sentence answer from both of you. Which trade do you think would be the most feasible and likely to impact the Super Bowl this year that we've discussed so far today?
That's a really tough one, to be honest. But I think Max Crosby to the Ravens would be the biggest impact on that. Although, to be honest, Max Crosby to the Lions would also be an impact on that side. So basically, Max Crosby is the biggest domino to fall if he is traded.
Shout, Ollie?
I would say Crosby like Jim, but I don't think he wants to. I don't think he's going to leave. I don't think he wants to leave. I'm trying to think of other. I don't think Garrett leaves either. I think he'd be a big addition, but I don't think he leaves. So I'm going to say Simmons to the Vikings and ensuring that that run defense and stopping it, because I think Brian Flores, when he's given the keys to a defensive kingdom, is brilliant. So I don't know, because there are not many choices, so I don't want to bring it back to the Vikings, but I don't think Crosby leaves. I don't think Garrett leaves.
I understand. Like it's hard.
Well, actually, sorry,
the Vikings out because of how damn interesting we are.
I'm going to change it. Cup to the Buccaneers. Cup to the Buccaneers. Okay, that'll have a big impact if he goes there and stays.
Definitely winning that division, 100%.
Yeah.
All right, then lads, thanks so much for joining me tonight to just chat football. It's been all right. Most entertaining thing for me has been seeing your dogs going crazy in the background there, Jim. So happy days all. Enjoy that on YouTube, folks. Good night for me.
Cheers, guys.
Good night.
Take care. That's a wrap.